Hello and welcome to today's episode of Owning Your Menopause. My guest today is a complete Wonder Woman and I am in awe of her many talents. I've been privy to see the side that many of you won't have seen at her recent book launch. She was an aspiring soprano singer who won Classic FM's Young Musician of the Year. The pressures of this industry became very overwhelming and she found herself fueling her body with fatty diets, but she decided enough was enough. She went on to study nutrition and after 4 grueling yet thrilling years, she obtained undergraduate and master's degree in nutrition. She started life as a nutritionist and has gone from strength to strength. She founded the Re-Nutrition Clinic, formerly on Harley Street, which she now runs remotely, and has just published her 5th book, The Science of Plant-Based Nutrition. She is a mum of 2 young children, and I am a massive fan and so excited to talk to her today. Rhiannon, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm grinning from ear to ear because I know that we've been looking forward to this conversation for so long. And we actually have a live talk as well in a week. So I get 2 of you in less than a week.
And that would fill most people with dread. I'm glad that you're excited by that prospect. Before we actually came on air, I know, I love it. Before we came on air, I was actually, then we'll get to the questions. I was actually showing both of your books because I have followed you on Instagram for a really, really long time. And the first book I ever bought, I know you've done 5, was Re-Nourish. And those recipes are just amazing. And that was when I probably really started myself in my menopause journey to think about nutrition, because I think the demographic of women currently navigating this life stage are completely sort of at a loss of perhaps what the best thing to do is with all the information is there. And then you've obviously sort of not fast forwarded, but you've definitely got those books out quite quickly because I know you've got so much knowledge. You've got The Science of Plant-Based Nutrition, which has just come out. So let's go quickly. I said in the introduction there was a change of career for you. Can you give us a little bit more insight into that and into your journey of how you're here today doing what you do?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just to reiterate what you just said about women wanting to know the answers, I feel like we're at such a pivotal moment in history. And won't it be interesting to look back in, 50 years' time for people that are here, or I hope we are here, but you just don't know. But you know what I mean? Just to look back and be like, wow, this is when women demanded answers. This is when we thought, hang on, why should we just sit back and let's learn more about our bodies? So I feel so blessed to be working as a nutritionist in this time because I find it fascinating. So it wasn't always that way. As you mentioned, I was a soprano, did all right back then. That's what I was doing. I was signed very young after winning the Classic FM competition. I'm not from a musical family, so it was all very new. No one in my family could sing. No one played an instrument, really. Didn't have lessons or anything. I was just very lucky and I had a talent and it saved me, basically. I got moved up to London. But actually, that was probably the most destructive time of my life, as I know you know, because the music industry back then was very much body, size, shape. Size 0 was the fashionable thing. They wanted you to always look like someone that was already there. So my kind of image and person to aspire to was Catherine Jenkins, because I was a classical singer. They wanted me to release a classical crossover type album, which I worked on with 3 different labels, just to give you an idea of how up and down and the turmoil of that time. Signed by one, dropped by one when the economy crashed in 2008, signed again, dropped, signed in a duo concept called Jazz Babes by Sony, signed, dropped. It was just relentless and destructive for my food and my eating habits. And all my friends were at uni. The only thing I thought I want to learn about was nutrition, probably because of my disordered relationship with it, but equally going to then study it transformed everything, changed the way I saw food. And I don't stand for nonsense anymore at this stage in my career. I've seen so much and it was the best thing I ever did, getting to do that. There are only 5 degrees in the country at the time that did nutrition. Now they're everywhere, so I feel very blessed.
And your journey with nutrition has really, I think, transformed as well through each book, and kind of you've brought something different to each of your books. And I guess that is as you've learnt more, and obviously as perhaps more misinformation or more information comes to light, it's really important that we we challenge that narrative and we give people the right sort of evidence-based access to fueling their bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel so lucky because the first book, obviously I never went looking to write books. Being an author wasn't on my hit list. I was very lucky. I haven't actually ever written a book proposal. I've always had these incredible opportunities come to me, which is amazing. But it's so interesting to see the landscape change. So Renourish was a big success in 2017. And that was very much old school. Here's me, as you showed at the start of the podcast, holding a bowl of salad, smiling to the camera. And it was great because that was I took a year to write that book. They gave me a year. I could write my philosophy. I talk you through body image, self-esteem, how to have a clinic session. That's what Renourish is about. Going back to the start, re-nourishing. And it also included recipes. But the platform I managed to get through nutrition, because at the time there weren't really any health professionals on social media. I used my platform and I got so lucky to write the first encyclopedia, The Science of Nutrition. I mean, both of them have become Sunday Times bestsellers, and I feel that is a sign of the times, that I was able to do something that didn't have a single picture of me in it. I wanted it to appeal to everybody. I want people to buy the books that don't know who I am, that want a nutrition encyclopedia, and it's not based on eat like her because she looks like this or any kind of narrative. I want it to cross boundaries and be accessible. And that's where the love from doing these types of imagery came with Dorlins Kinsley. And I grew up reading DK encyclopedias. I had a CD-ROM with the little wizard hat on it. And I remember learning with DK, and now I'm a DK author. It's phenomenal. But yeah, times have changed. People don't want to be lied to. They don't want to be sold glossy images. They want the hard facts.
Why... I'll stick to my questions. So I know I'm going to totally divert because I know the things you say I'm going to pick up on. You really do focus on sort of the science of food, which I think is something that obviously not necessarily a lot of people do, but I think as a nation, and certainly the women that I work with, they want to know more behind what they're putting into their bodies and why we need that. You don't overcomplicate it, which I really love, because again, I think there's too much information. Everything is quite overcomplicated. What would you say are, I guess, your key essentials for women in particular? I would say like this stage of life, but again, I also want to avoid sort of always saying menopause, because the reality is we should be moving our body in a way that everybody does for life. There just might be certain tweaks and changes we need to make. And again, the same when it comes to nutrition. So what are your key essentials? That's just for women in particular to make sure they have.
I think it's such an interesting concept. And I was thinking about this question and I was thinking how best to answer it, because instead of focusing on individual items, what we know from the research, if you look at the most recent research on menopause, and obviously we need more. I think I heard recently that we have about 94,000 studies on menopause. Don't quote me, the numbers probably changed. And if you look at pregnancy, for instance, there's like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of studies. So it's almost like women at some point in their lives have been forgotten about, and we're only just starting to build up the database. So we need a lot more. But I think in particular, the messaging for women has been restrict, and even more so when you get to midlife, because our distribution of body fat changes. Estrogen as a receptor, a hormone, is found in so many areas of our body, everywhere, into our gut lining, and that's why we get all these different types of symptoms. But the overwhelming evidence points to diet quality. So let's break that down a little bit, because if you have better diet quality, you are more likely to not experience menopause symptoms to the same severity as somebody that doesn't eat well. And by eating well, I mean calcium. I know people go on and on and on about it, but bone fractures are huge. Osteopenia, which is halfway towards osteoporosis, in like reduced bone mass density. I know you talk about this because weight-bearing exercise is so important, but we really need it in our diets. And it's not just from dairy. And I discuss this in my new book, The Science of Plant-Based Nutrition, that it's found in a variety of different sources. We can't just expect to just eat one yogurt a day and think, I'm getting all the calcium I need, because our requirements go up as we age. And vitamin D, again, is so important. We should be taking a supplement. Some women and men all year round, depending on their ethnicity, the colour of their skin, how much they get outside, how much sunscreen they wear. Vitamin D is really important. I think the most common nutrient deficiency, Kate, is fibre. And I speak about this a lot, purely because we're still not hitting our 5 a day, let alone 30 plants a week. So it's something that helps keep us regularly. There's a lot of research on menopause or midlife or perimenopause that fibre influences the gut, influences how regular our bowels are, estrogen receptors in the gut, all of these sorts of things are linked. So if we just start at that, and obviously fats, don't fear fat. A lot of the generation going through menopause now are the ones that grew up with parents that told them, I can see you nodding away, yep, low fat, low fat, low fat. But actually, even in saturated fats, which are found in animal produce like meat and dairy, it's actually better to have more saturated fats from dairy than meat, for instance. Meat, we know it's not good to have too much of with the saturated fat content, especially red and processed meats. They're even classed as a class 1 carcinogen. But if you stick to dairy and healthy fats that contain your unsaturated fatty acids like olive oil, think Mediterranean, avocado, olives, nuts, seeds, that's great. That's a quick overview, very quick overview for a very big question.
Yeah, no, it is a big question. I think, do you know what? I think, funny enough, you touch on that. Like, obviously, we took in what our parents said. I think when you mentioned fibre, I think when I also had sort of a disordered relationship with food, I think I thought fibre would make me gain weight. And I wonder if that's still a lot of what women think. So, you know, because the women I work with, and I very much imagine that you get these women in your clinic as well, when I say to them, you know, maybe they do want to lose weight, and I think it's important to touch on that, because it's okay to want to lose weight if you need to, if you've been told to, if it is, you know, we shouldn't dismiss somebody's kind of goal. But often they'll say, but well, you're not eating enough and you need to eat more, as you've just said, fats, fibre, good carbs, all of those things. And they look terrified at the prospect of having to eat more. But the reality is they are really undernourishing their bodies.
It's such a hard psychological component to get past the visual size of a plate, the habitual things from childhood, the narratives in the media with less for women, the smaller you are. It's a huge conversation, and it's heartbreaking, because actually if you fill your plate and you create a larger plate of plant-based foods like pulses and things, the energy in that, so we're talking calories, is far less than if you were to have a big plate of your meat, your cheese, your dairy, your ultra processed food items, your, you know, your white breads, your pastries, all that sort of thing. So if people just ate better, as in larger plates, and making a salad larger by adding different things on a plate, doing bigger stir fries, thinking of what can I add in rather than what can I take out, they naturally will be helping their metabolism, helping their fibre, helping their bowel movements. But the messaging with fibre and weight gain probably originates from the carbohydrates, which is hard. I mean, that hit me hard when I was singing. I was terrified of carbohydrates. And then I learned at uni that to every 1 molecule of glucose or carbohydrate, you attract 3 or 4 of water to help the digestive process. So you bloat more and you need more water, and it's just water weight. You feel this way because you're satisfied, and it's overriding in your brain. Is it a feeling or is it a fact right now what's happening? I think I wrote about that actually back in Renourish, the first book, because very often it's very confused what we feel with what's actually factual, and sometimes we have to take a step back and really think, okay, I may feel heavier and fat right now because I just ate this huge bowl of brown wholemeal spaghetti with delicious beans and pulses. Actually, the factual thing is I'm retaining more water, it's a lot of fibre, I am going to pass a lot of this in my next bowel movement the next day.
Yeah, do you know, I love that, because you almost kind of play like slightly into my next question with that, which is, you know, I think playing into what you've just said about that moment in time where you feel fat, and that's the moment, or people feel bloated, or they feel like they've eaten too much. They might go, right, that's it, I'm going to look at this and I'm going to go on a diet and I'm going to do this. We've become such a nation of quick fixes. So as you've just said, if you step back and you imagine the process of what that meal is doing, again, playing into that, people literally want to maybe have that one meal or do it, and then for the next day, for that weight loss to have subsided, for their habits to have changed, for, you know, let's talk that quick fix, taking a pill, doing all of this. It just doesn't happen. And I think that that's one of the hardest things that you are possibly up against, and me, in terms of bringing fitness into people's lives.
It's psychology. Psychology and food is so heavily interlinked. It's funny, I was away with two of my closest friends at the weekend. We rarely get away. We went for 2 nights away from the kids, and it was this huge break. But even being educated around food and nutrition doesn't take away that desire for quick fix, because it's human nature, right? Evolutionarily speaking, of course we're going to search for an option that saves us time, that makes our life more productive, that means we don't have to put as much effort into something else. And the problem now is that it's saturated, they're everywhere, and it's really hard to put your detective hat on, especially as a woman, when you are bombarded with it subliminally. You don't even realise it's that TV advert or that radio advert in the background or that Instagram thing you just scrolled past. The problem with quick fixes is that our bodies aren't designed for them when it comes to health. Health is a long-term outcome. It's an ongoing, constant, chronic outcome that we have to be thinking about. So the only thing we can control day in, day out is how much we move and what we eat. And every opportunity to eat is an opportunity to nourish. So if you're actually using that opportunity to take a shake that contains artificial sweeteners and doesn't actually give you any fibre or nutrition, it's just a weight loss shake, you're not using that opportunity to nourish. And your body is going to be like, hang on a minute, where is my nutrients coming from? It changes the composition of fat cells. Our fat cells are depleted very quickly, therefore they want to fill up very quickly, and often fat cells can then divide and multiply, and we get more fat than we initially started out with because we went on a quick fix diet. It's like bubble wrap. You pop it and you imagine your body's full of bubble wrap, and your body just wants to inflate all those bubbles as quick as it possibly can, because that's our evolution to survive. So quick fix diets do not work. Long-term goal, what can we do? Think about strength. Like my mission is to be strong. It's something I neglected because of having babies. And I know you love that, because I'm thinking, right, once a week, if I can set myself a goal to get strong again after the babies, I will. But it's so hard. It's hard. Life gets in the way.
It does. Yeah, it does. And I think that is a really, again, it's really important, because that's strength, and we are building our muscle with, repairing our muscle with, building our strong bones with the food, goes hand in hand. And I often think that women think it's one or the other. If I've done a really good workout, or like they use one as a reward for the other. Again, and I know that was very much my narrative for a while. Sort of, I'd had my disordered eating. Then I was worried, so then I sort of over-exercised, but then it was fine because then I could eat what I wanted to. And it's been a long journey to separate the two, and to learn that I want to move my body because I want to be strong, and I want to eat because I enjoy it, and that's kind of, it's hard. It's taken a long time to get there. Let's just quickly touch on something, because you talked about the sort of that bubble wrap effect. Where does fasting sit with all of that? Because I do feel that, and again, I know it's such a big question, but the women that I work with that perhaps are fasting, they've just heard it, and so they do it, and then they'll say, but by like midday I'm so hungry, I've had coffee all morning, and then I just want to eat like rubbish, and my body just, and then it's just constant. And it's like, that's not for me. I don't think that what fasting is necessarily about, and it doesn't work for every woman either.
It's so unique. Fasting is huge. In terms of scientists are on the fence, and then the gender divide of men and women, it does suit men better than women because they're a pretty steady state. They don't really go through fluctuations like we do. If you're going through menstruation, perimenopause, menopause, depending on the state in your life. Obviously, if you're pregnant, definitely don't fast. There's so much to think about. And then let's just break it down. You look at our children in society. We wouldn't tell them to miss a meal if they're hungry. I think that's a nice way of looking at it, just to simplify it a little bit. But first of all, it's also natural, because some days we don't end up having breakfast because life gets in the way. We're busy, especially if you've got kids as well, or you've got a very demanding job. And then you naturally would just eat a bit of an earlier lunch quite well, probably, and then have dinner. And that suits some people perfectly fine. There's three problems of fasting. The first is, can you get the 30 grams of fibre you need in 2 meals and snacks? Or the second problem is, does it trigger binge eating and disordered eating habits, which for a lot of people it does, because it's an active choice to restrict and then you're waiting. And sometimes the thought process, this isn't for everybody, by the way, just for some people, it can really trigger binge episodes and a vicious cycle with food. Then the third problem is that the research out there is pretty much still only on energy restriction. And a lot of people talk about gut healing, they talk about estrogen receptors and sensitivity. We still don't have a concrete answer to that. Potentially, every now and again, fasting might be beneficial, but definitely not every single day of the year, forever and always. And definitely not drinking coffee on an empty stomach for that prolonged period of time. And one interesting thing about coffee, because a lot of women think, oh, it's really good for me now, it's a plant point. You can still get the benefits from decaf, because it's not the caffeine that gives you the benefit, it's the actual coffee itself, the beans. So for women, women are having too much caffeine in society, and it's not helpful. So you can still get your coffee, just try and make a switch to decaf. So fasting will help with long-term weight loss if you don't experience those problems I've just listed. And if you are that type of individual that can go to work, not think about it, you're totally fine, you're hydrated, drinking loads of water, you eat a really healthy lunch, you have great snacks, nuts, seeds, all that kind of stuff, you have dinner, and you're happy, you go to bed, great. I would say the majority of people's lives don't work like that.
Yeah, I agree. And actually it's interesting because being totally transparent, I've definitely tried to do that fasting, but I am that, and I guess that's just my personality. I'm that binge person. I'm so hungry, give me the fridge. And so actually what I've worked so much better for me is having actually a very savoury, protein, fibre-rich breakfast seems to work for my sugar balance. And actually fine enough, that's something I have spoken, because I know that again a lot of us talk about Greek yogurts and putting on the nuts and putting on the seeds. That weirdly for me, Greek yogurt doesn't fill me up enough, or it doesn't feel to me like I've had enough. I like to have broccoli, maybe some soya, sorts of tofu, flaxseed kind of breakfast. My kids look at me like I've totally lost the plot. But actually that probably leads me nicely into bringing to my kids, because I think my older two have missed out on a lot of the information that you're giving now about food and how good it is, our gut bacteria, how that plays a role in inflammation and disease and all of those things. Obviously Rupert, my youngest, and I'm not saying it's the best, but he's got the lung disease, so actually in terms of his immune system and boosting that, I'm happy that I can pass on what we know now to make him a little bit stronger. But it's interesting when I sit around the table, or when I'm with my big kids and I see what they think is okay to eat compared to what I think is okay to eat, and we are worlds apart. All I can do is hope they take on what I'm trying to fill my body with and take that with them when they do leave home. But ultra processed food, that's obviously a word that's become big, and I still think we are a generation of it, but I think my kids are very much that they would go to McDonald's every day if they could. They really could, even though that for me is a no-go. Cocoa Pops, the sugary breakfasts. Let's talk, I guess, we know what ultra-processed foods are, but maybe let's just bring it back, because there's processed food and then ultra-processed food, and there is a place, and I know you've done reels on this, not necessarily a place for it, but it's just, we have to be careful.
We do, and it's so nuanced, because first of all, you can't point blame at anybody. So it's so hard as a parent to think, oh, it's my fault, or it's so hard to think it's the retailer's fault, it's this person's fault. It's this discussion, let's just keep it very what it actually is, just to discuss, because it's really emotive, and I think it's so hard to navigate, because it is the world we live in. We're talking about something that's so indoctrinated into society that some people, it's a discussion of privilege, first of all, because we can put food on the table for our kids, so there is a choice. Some people don't have a choice, they don't have that educational option, so It is a huge discussion. Now, processed foods, we used to, let's say 20, 30 years ago, so not that long ago, we used to make lots of things from scratch using minimally processed foods like butter, sugar, if we were making something. But nowadays, people don't even bake anymore. They would buy an ultra-processed food cake rather than making it with minimal ingredients. They would buy a ready meal instead of making something from minimally processed ingredients, which is putting beans into a can, putting olive oil, extracting it, going for a process into a glass bottle of olive oil. Nowadays, we've kind of cut out all the stages of processing in society because of time, convenience, money, lack of education, cooking skills not being passed down onto different generations. They've been lost because the working hours went up, taxes have gone up, everything. So we now just go straight to stage 4 in NOVA, which is Carlos Montero's definition on scientific research in Brazil, but we actually use it around the world. It's one of the only classification systems that people can agree on, and it's used in a variety of research. But we go straight to number 4, ultra-processed foods. So a lot of us are just consuming additives and more palatable food that makes you want more. So of course the kids want to keep going to McDonald's every day. It tastes good, they're getting reward lights in their brain, but what they don't realise is that over a period of time, they're not getting nourishment, and that's the problem. But science is divided. So this is where the conversation gets complicated. So some scientists think, no, ultra-processed foods are fine. It's just the amount of salt, saturated fat and sugar in them that's the problem. I agree. That is a problem. Then there's other researchers out there that say, no, we think it's the additives that we created to enable us to eat in mass volume around the world. So preservatives to stop food spoiling. You know, once you cut an apple, it will go brown. If you put food on a shop shelf, it would go off quickly. So we wouldn't have supermarkets without additives because nothing would sit on the shop shelves for long enough. You know, you're looking at preventing spoilage, quality, taste, texture, thickening items. So you can have plant-based alternatives to an animal-based alternative, or allergies, or people with celiac, and we've got to create all these different products, which is why we've had to create different things that go in it. Then all these items are classed as ultra-processed, and some people say our guts don't react well to these, that these are the items that make it extra palatable. Perhaps a high proportion of these items links to chronic diseases. So it's an ongoing discussion at the moment, and I'm writing something on it behind the scenes at the moment because it's so interesting to see everything that's coming out around it. After Dr. Chris, I'd say the Bible, everybody should read Dr. Chris Van Tulleken. Is it Ultra Processed People? Okay, I think that's the name of the book. Yeah, Ultra Processed People.
It's ultra
and
processed.
It's a really good audiobook. Yeah, and honestly, it just opens your eyes to the fact this conversation is down to the fact we're not cooking from scratch anymore. It's gone, it's died a generation. We need to get that back. If we can give our kids cooking skills, they will be okay one day. And the food industry is a beast. I think that's kind of where I can leave that because it's hard.
Yeah, and it's funny. I downloaded an app actually recently that someone suggested. You've probably heard of it, Yucca. And that's something neither of us are paid by them, as far as I know. I would love to get your view because it was quite interesting. I took my daughter and she chose these hideous blue, sour, Smurf-looking type sweets, and she was like, "Can I get those?" And I was like, "No, they're disgusting." And we scanned it, and actually, it did sort of say the carcinogenic side of the additives, and she did think twice, and she did put it back. So I was like, okay, on that side it's good. I don't necessarily want her to be counting food the whole time because I think, again, I know you and I both sit in that camp of not numbers, but I think to highlight to her actually that is not okay because maybe of the carcinogenic sort of additives behind it. And it did make her stop and think. She put them back. What would be your thought on that?
Well, I find it really interesting because actually sweeteners aren't classified as class 1 carcinogens. The only food items that have concrete research is red and processed meat. That's it. They're the only foods that people should really be cutting down on and avoiding. But obviously, sweets, you don't want to be having them all the time. And if you have a lot of it in excess, then it perhaps would up the risk. So we're talking about risk. When we classify things in this way, it's about the risk of developing. But I think the app I can't say the specific one because I don't think that's right of them to say that's a carcinogen, because actually it's not. So
Yeah.
I think that's quite scaremongering and deceptive. But she maybe made a better choice and went for a different item of sweets over that type of sweet. So then you're looking at, actually, there is a lesser of two evils in that kind of sense. But also sweets are soul foods. So every now and again, going out and having that terrible blue dye that is not meant to be in foods and shouldn't be actually anymore is okay. But I find apps like that worrying because the public still don't understand. I mean, even scientists are on the fence with it. So understanding what they're coming up rating, it's so fascinating for me. I worked with an app a year ago with a Cambridge professor who's studying UPFs, and they put a UPF rating on their shopping basket at the end, and she had a very specific formula and criteria, and we were umming and ahhing about it for ages. But we decided in the end it was a good idea to show people on a scale of like 1 to 5 how processed this is. But to say it's a carcinogen, I think that's quite scary for people.
Yeah. And actually, do you know what? I think, again, it's that thing that we know how to eat. We know what we should be eating. We know what looks good. I mean, in no doubt does a blue, sugary, Smurf-like sweet look like it's going to be good for you.
Yum.
You kind of don't need,
Yeah.
you don't need an app to tell you. And I know, you like to stay away from that sort of side. One question I do want to come to, just I know in terms of time, sort of the glucose monitors, seeing as we are talking about sort of measuring stuff, where do you sit on that? Because I know there's a real mix in what nutritionists think. Some say, it's a really good idea for somebody who doesn't have an idea, and it can really help them learn. But that perhaps, on the flip side, there is an overusage of them for people that don't necessarily need to.
I mean, my philosophy with nutrition is it's a red flag if someone says all or nothing to begin with. I mean, yeah, they are helpful for some people in our clinic. For other people, not in a million years, and totally unnecessary and pointless. So it's like, what is it going to tell you at the end of the day? For some people that don't realise how they feel after they eat, and they can then think, oh, that did mean my blood sugar reacted in a different way. But it's so expensive. And again, it's taken away the sensors from people that actually need them, that are diabetic, that need these sensors. There was a shortage at one point because they'd all been privatised. So from that angle, I'm not massive fan, but I've seen the benefits from some people in our clinic from following specific programs. Other people with disordered eating. For instance, if you take myself as an example, I like to call us the worried well, because I'm always very keen to optimise my health, but I know I'm pretty healthy, I do well, and that is the phrase I use, and I apply it to myself, the worried well. And I did a trial, used it, discovered nothing I didn't know about myself already, because my blood sugar level range is fine. I'm actually pretty good at reacting. I can have porridge in the morning with berries and things on it and a tiny bit of protein, and my blood sugar won't be massively high because that's my type of body. But for some people, that information's invaluable, because then they will dictate the different types of snacks and they will help them be more productive. But the overall message at the end of it is eat a plant-based diet, no matter what you do, because it's more fibre, it's got more healthy fats, and the things that slow blood sugars are fibre and healthy fats. So that's kind of where I sit on it. Helpful for some, for others not. Like you say, there's no one size fits all.
I'm going to do 2 more questions, because I do want to go into that plant-based just very quickly. Because again, yes, when we are navigating menopause, I talk a lot about protein. Protein we know is really good for hormone balance. It's good for repair. It's good for satiety. It's good for, it's obviously a brilliant macronutrient. Women that are eating a plant-based diet, one of the things they often ask me is, what are the good plant-based proteins? Like, where can they, because I think, again, when we think protein, we automatically default to meat.
I know, it's the biggest misconception. Also, just to reiterate to listeners, plant-based isn't vegan. So I don't want people to think plant-based means you have to cut out animal products. You still have it. It's just the focus on your plate becomes the plants. So you can still have that piece of meat, just reduce the portion size of it and fill your plate with more beans and pulses. Big misconception, because actually protein's found in all plants, just in smaller quantities. People don't realise that even in broccoli there's small bits of protein. Now obviously I'm not saying that is a protein source, it's just got tiny bits. So the more volume you eat across the day, and if you do have a focus of reducing your animal produce or maybe even swapping meat for an egg and then working your way down, you will still get enough. Now, how the body works in terms of our metabolism, we've got, it's called the Krebs cycle. It's horribly scientific and horrid. I had to draw it in the Science of Nutrition book and I hated it because I hate breaking it all down. But if you think of your metabolism, then carbs go in, fats go in, proteins go in. Your body doesn't know when it eats a protein, if it's from a plant, if it's from an animal. It doesn't know what sources you're putting in. It just breaks it all down chemically, and then you get something left called an amino acid pool, which is all the little building blocks of the proteins from various sources across that day. And then it uses those proteins in your body effectively. So as long as you are eating a balanced plate that contains all food groups, carbs, proteins, fats, fruit or veg, at every meal, you are getting enough. I'm not worried about women getting enough protein. I'm worried about women getting enough fiber, because they just do not focus on it. And protein is so easy to get from everywhere if you know what to put in your meal. It's just such a misconception, and we need less than you actually think. It's obviously important for everything, but honestly, the problem in this country right now is a lack of fruit and veg and fibre, because protein doesn't prevent against chronic diseases. Protein isn't the thing giving you those antioxidants, those minerals, the things that are going to reduce your menopause symptoms. Protein will just build blocks for your hormones and your muscle structure. Great, but we need that other part of our diet with it. That would be my message, just not to worry too much, and have a read of the book if you want a whole list of sources of protein, but they're everywhere, I can assure you.
I love it, and actually that's where we're going to sort of finish up on, which is, can you tell us, I guess, we talked about a little bit more about the book, and obviously I know from having been at your book launch, you've got you're really passionate about campaigning and getting into Parliament and making changes there. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that's all going?
Thank you so much for asking about that. So I'm hoping very much so that this September we have an answer from the government. I've been campaigning for a long time from the Privy Council, and things are getting sorted now we have a new government. In the area of nutrition anyway, it's become a focus. So we should have an answer if we can get the title nutritionist protected, first of all, because half the misinformation online comes from, people not, dietitians protected, nutritionist needs to go through a charter. Then we can use that to get more health professionals into the education system, which is what needs to happen, because there's no early years education surrounding nutrition. There's no focus on it until the age of 8 in schools predominantly. There's just not enough. Even in the private sector, there isn't enough. So it's so interesting to see this huge gap that's missing. So the mission I have with obviously the books is, first of all, to get encyclopedias of nutrition and relevant resources into libraries and schools, libraries around the country. Because why do we have general knowledge encyclopedias and we don't have an encyclopedia on what we eat, the nutrition and the food? Like, it's just wild when we think about that. The fact we all have to eat, yet we're not taught anything about it. So the wider goal of the work that I'm doing at the moment behind the scenes, and it takes a long time, it's a long one, is lobbying for change and working with various other bodies like medical bodies, doctors and different professions to get this across. So I will be shouting about it loud when I've got the chance to, when I know there's something I can do. But the book is an encyclopedia of nutrition, and it's to help people that want to be healthier, live longer, make changes, and they just take what they want from it. It's like a coffee table book. It's in Q&A format. So is it normal to bloat? Where do I get my protein from? Should I be worried about my blood sugar balance? What plant milk should I be drinking? What's the truth? All of that is covered in the book. And you take what you want from it. Close it up again, come back to it whenever you want. And you change what you want. There's no prescriptive, you must do this. That's what I didn't want.
And that's why I think it's so good, because I think actually, it is that thing that as parents, for those of us that are parents, we need to have those conversations. That's where the early education starts. And actually it's funny, because when I say to Rupert, because he's on antibiotics quite a lot, let's have that for your gut bacteria. He does eye roll me now when I say gut bacteria, but he's aware of it, and it will be, I really hope, something that sticks with him. So thank you. I do have an end question, which I do want to ask, which is, what's the one thing you wish every woman knew, I guess from your perspective as a nutritionist, before starting her perimenopause?
Oh, from a nutrition perspective,
Or from any
I wish
perspective.
I would say I wish every woman knew it's about adding in, not taking out. But I think that is the biggest message you can leave in is, you know, if you're doing a stir fry and you normally just add chicken and veg, get a can of beans out and just chuck it in. It's just adding more. Add a sprinkle of flaxseed or whatever you got in the house in on top. Try a new vegetable that week. Make a switch. And I just wish and if I could have two things, it would also be a sort of kindness aspect, because for some women the symptoms are going to be horrific and other women won't get as much, and we have to just realize that every woman is going through some kind of physiological change in our lives. In fact, we're constantly changing from puberty onwards all the way up, and we have to just be more compassionate. Yeah.
I love that. And I think that's great. I love that tip, because I think that sums up everything that you're trying to do, which is to not make it complicated, to not make it seem daunting, because I think that's where so many people sadly just kind of give up. But like by adding and not taking away, you know, that sounds very doable and appealing. So thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I know how busy you are. I can't wait to see you. Obviously, this book might be out after we've done our live panel talk, but I will see you next week. If you haven't bought, if you don't follow Rhiannon, first of all, please do. If you can just give your Instagram handles again, and then obviously please go and buy the book. I'm holding it up here, and any of her books, because they are all brilliant.
Oh, thank you so much, my love. No, it's at Retrition, which is RHI, then Trition, like the word nutrition, TRITION, everywhere. Or if you just search Rhiannon Lambert on Google, you probably will get everything, books and all that sort of thing. But yeah, if you do want to buy a book, every book counts in terms of me then showing these numbers to the lobby that I'm trying to do, that people are interested in encyclopedias that don't have to have glossy images of people holding salad bowls on them, because I think that is such a pivotal change, that education resources are needed. And this is a resource. It's not just current. This is what I like to say about nutrition. It is a resource for every age. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day. I know we're both scooting off to do parental duties, but thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Kate, how are we?